Lord Jesus and Holy Spirit, thank you for this day. Thank you for what you are doing in and through and with each of us here. Thank you for the growth. Thank you for the new understandings. Thank you for getting to know each other better. And in the process, discover that in getting to know each other better, that we're getting to know you better too. And Father, now, lead us this evening, take our bodies as a living sacrifice for you to do with them exactly what you want, to manifest and incarnate in our bodies and all the faculties that we have and all the surroundings in which we are encased in a manifest kingdom of heaven, perfection in every way, body, mind, and spirit. Thy will, thy kingdom, thy spirit. Amen. And the paths of righteousness, the more modern way of translating that is that he leads me in the right paths. He leads me in the right way. And as we were talking about the other evening, for his name's sake, or for his name's sake means because this is his nature. It's to lead you to fulfillment. It isn't to inhibit you, but it's to release you. In other words, God's all for you. And that's what that means. So he leads me in the right paths. You know, there's shepherd paths out in the Middle East there. They say that there are paths which are so old that nobody has any idea how old they are. And nobody has any idea when they began. And nobody has any idea who made them or who found them. Sometime away back in the mists of ancient history, some shepherd with his sheep looking for a place to water them or a place to feed them, found a path to some place which would be good, and gradually he went over it time after time after time until it became a well-worn path. And other shepherds found the same thing, and they began to take their sheep there also. Time after time, until generations passed, probably hundreds of years passed, and other shepherds, little by little throughout history, extended these paths higher up or lower down or wider or whatever they were. And they found out many things in the course of building upon what other people had built before them. They found out that oftentimes the short way wasn't actually the short way home, that it would lead to a dangerous precipice, or that it would lead them through some area which would be infested with snakes and some other wild animals. And so they found out oftentimes that the short way home, or the short way to the fulfillment of what their purpose and their desires was actually the long way. Well, this builds up over thousands upon thousands of years, and that these paths now, even the paths which they're using now, they don't know where they began. But somebody found them. Somebody explored, and you can be almost sure that in the process of time, that in the discovery of these pathways toward water and toward food, that there were many people that lost their lives also. But nevertheless, these pathways were found. And we found out that there could be, you might think, well, there must be other ways to get to the place where we want to go to. And undoubtedly, young shepherds who were learning the trade secrets of the area, got the idea that, why do I have to do it in this way? Why do I have to learn all of these seemingly little rules and laws and everything? It's hemming me in. I desire freedom. I want to be free. I want to go farther and wider, and all this stuff is just slowing me up. Until he finds out, maybe on his own, that those pathways aren't there to inhibit him, that they aren't there to hold him down, that they are there to make it easier for him to find the fulfillment that he is really after, that they are more efficient ways of reaching his goals, than if he had to begin all over again by himself and learn what it took, I don't know, thousands or tens of thousands or possibly hundreds of thousands of years for where generation and millennium after millennium had to find a little bit there. But all of a sudden he is faced with a whole set of body of rules and laws, and he thinks that these things are here to hem him in. Well, I suppose you could say the same thing about everybody at some time or other has thought the same thing about the Ten Commandments. That, boy, here are these old rules which have been handed down. Here are these old rules made up by what? A set of priests or ministers or rabbis or whatever they were. These are the rules of old folks. They're put there to hem me in. When I want to be free, when I want to go out and I want to make it on my own, here they've got all of these old rules which have been made by old people, old stick-in-the-muds, until they found out as life goes on, if they are the kind of people who go out and experiment on their own, they found out after a while that those rules aren't there to hold you down. They are there to prevent hurt. They are there to prevent tragedy of all sorts. They are more efficient means of reaching the ends, of reaching the desires of your heart, of reaching the hungers of your mind, the hungers of your desires, the hungers of your emotions, the hungers of your body. They aren't there to hold you down. They are more efficient means toward fulfillment. And there's a wonderful story about that. When the HMS Bounty got on its own, and they finally ended up in Tahiti, in Papiti or Tahiti. I don't know where they did end up, but it was out there in the Pacific. And with the natives on the island, why, all of a sudden they were in a place there where there were no cops, where there were no judges, and there were no jails. And they said, man, you can have anything that you can take. You can go in there and you can have women and you can have anything at all, and no cop on the beat is going to knock on your door, and nobody's going to throw you into jail, and this is heaven. And so they went at it, hammer and tongs and everything else, until they had almost wiped themselves out. Until they had almost killed all of each other, where nothing was sacred, property or person or anything else. And when they had almost destroyed themselves, somebody remembered that on the Bounty, on that old rotten ship, which was almost rotted. Then that somebody remembered that there might be a Bible there. And if they could only find a Bible, they could learn the rules of living. They could learn the safeguards of life. They could learn the means whereby they could come toward fulfillment and whereby they could learn trust and love and responsibility. And so the story is that they went to the Bounty, and there they actually did find a Bible. And they began to devour it like hungry animals, reading and reading and reading in order to find out what the rules of life, the kind of rules that would enable them to trust others and to learn to trust themselves also. To learn the kind of rules that could make life clean and dependable. And so they did. So here was an actual incident in history where they found out that these rules, that these pathways, and after all the laws which are written down as the laws of Moses, I don't think you can say that. Well, we know that it isn't so. These rules didn't begin with Moses. Moses undoubtedly had a tremendously brilliant mind. You would almost imagine that he had to be trained as a lawyer. But what it is that at some time or other, somebody sits down and views past history. You could see life as a laboratory of human experimentation since the year one. But you'll find many of these laws which we have in the Mosaic Law, in the Code of Hammurabi, written long before Moses. And here you find the same kind of a thread. Not as complete, but you'll find many of the same statements there as to the sacredness of human personality, as to worshiping God, and some other things. But oftentimes genius, oftentimes the inspiration of the Spirit is to have somebody look at a common scene, look at an old scene, look at all the facts of history and say, what does it mean? And go off by himself, go up into a mountain, whether it was actually an outer mountain or whether it was some sort of a mountaintop experience on the inside. What's the difference? Somebody, under the inspiration of God, under the inspiration of the Spirit, goes up into a mountain and says, what does it mean? And gradually the pattern of human history starts to fall into place. This is what we have learned in the experiments and in laboratories of human living. Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not covet that which belongs to anybody else. And so on and so forth. And he found out that these were laws not that were dreamed up by somebody, but something that had been proved by people possibly over many thousands or many millions of years even. And finally, somebody puts it down in a crystal clear, it's as if he takes all the experiences of life and just squeezes them out and says, what is the essence of living? How can I find the satisfaction of my heart? How can I quench the thirst of my inquiring mind? How can I get along with others? And then he's able to put them in 10 rules that are crystal clear. These are the right path. There are physical paths, there are material paths, but there are also pathways of the mind, there are pathways of the emotions, there are pathways of the spirit also, which a man has to learn, not to hold them in, but to release them. Not to hold them down, but to give them wings. Not to make them waste time as an apprentice, but to save time in the long run so that his energy, so that his talents, so that all the potentialities and possibilities in him may be released to save years. After I had seen a brother of mine, after not seeing him for years and years and years, and he had been in the Navy, I was in the Army, and we had done all kinds of things. And I suppose that there's some kind of a stubborn streak in us that we just had to go out and, experiment on our own, which is a nice way to put it. Doing social research, if you will, and all that stuff. And we spent this whole evening and far into the morning, and we were swapping experiences and stories and everything else. And I don't know, sometime about 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, or whenever it was, we said, well, shoot. And we just about both said it at about the same time. Actually, we haven't learned anything new. There isn't anything that we have done, either for good or for ill, that we hadn't heard of, either in church or in the home. But there was just something of a rebellious nature in us that said, boy, I'm going to go out, I'm going to try it. But actually, from the years of, good and bad, we really hadn't learned anything new. If we had been born, or if whatever we are on the inside had been the gift of being able to accept what millions upon millions or billions upon billions of people all throughout history had already learned. How much happier, how much more would we have achieved, would we have done? How much time would we have saved ourselves? Now, there are people of that sort, and I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. You know the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet there? And he comes up to Peter and he says, and Peter said, "You'll never wash my feet." I mean, this was washing the feet was the job of a slave. And here was the one that Peter considered the Christ, the Son of the living God, a king, more than a king, and he's down there doing the work of a slave. And Peter's mad from his toes up to his head, and he said, "You'll never wash my feet." He said, "If I don't wash them, you can't be one of us. You can't be one with me." There, and then he said, "Well, Lord, then not only my feet, but my head and my hands also." And he came back and said, "No, Peter, the only thing that's necessary is to wash your feet." Now, water, since as far back in history as you can go, is a symbol of baptism. It's a symbol of a washing clean. It's a symbol of beginning over again. It's a symbol, in its way, of the Spirit, of being endued with a new spirit, of going in a new direction, of having new goals and ambitions and a new will, a new attitude toward yourself and man and God and nature and everything else. It is as if you were born again, going in a new way. And this goes back as far in history as you can go. You can find it in the Romans, and you can find it in the Greeks, and you can find it in the African tribes. You find it every place. There's something instinctive, some untaughtness within man that makes this symbol for a washing clean and being born again and walking in a new life. So you can see this where he says, "No, Peter, all that is necessary is to wash your feet." And you remember that when Jesus first came to the disciples, he didn't offer them any involved explanations about anything at all. When Andrew and that other disciple went to him in the beginning and they said, "Rabbi, where do you live?" He said, "Come and see." And when he was walking along the beach and the disciples are there washing their nets, mending them, he said, "Follow me. Follow me. Walk in my footsteps. Walk after me." The path is already there, so that the baptism of the feet, I would say, would be a gift of the ability to discipline yourself and follow what has been already discovered for you. The gift of discipline. The gift of the ability or the childlike love or whatever it is to walk, to follow after, to follow in the footsteps of. The footsteps of the mind, the footsteps of the emotions, the footsteps of the body, or whatever else you want to say. But that there's so much has already been discovered that your chances of doing any more than reapplying it to the particular situation that you're in is mighty small. It's all handed to you there in a platter. If you have the childlike and the loving spirit to accept it, it's already there. All of heaven's there. If all that we say about God is so, that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, then heaven is, if God has always been, heaven has always been. Perfection and the means toward fulfillment has always been also. And the pathway, oftentimes when you begin to talk with a person about this, why they get the idea that you are trying to sell them on some bill of goods which hasn't been, which is so new that you aren't. It's a theory. It's a hypothesis. I mean, it's an airy-fairy, quicksilver, something or other, and gee whiz, that you are buying a pig in a poke. Yet the fact of the matter is that it's a pathway which is very well trod. Like the pathways of the shepherd, it's been laid out for forever, as far back as you can go. The signposts on the way are well marked. The road signs are all there. Billions upon billions of billions of people have already walked that way. You're not buying anything at all which has been untried, and this goes for the whole world over. And you can apply it either to the Hebrew line or to the Christian line, or you can apply it to any other line, whether it's the Hindu line or the Confucian line, or you can go into your primitive tribes, and you'll find many, many echoes of the same thing. The pathway is well trod, well trodden. Thing is, there is an old hymn that said, He leadeth me, oh words with heavenly comfort fraught. I think that one of the greatest promises in the whole Bible is that we know not how to pray as we ought, but the Spirit makes intercession for us according to the will of God. No matter who you are, you're going to come up against situations in your own life. You're going to come up against events and circumstances which you're involved in that you don't know what the answer is. You don't know what's right, either for yourself or for anybody else. And always you're going to have to pray. Or always you're going to have to elicit the very depths and desires within yourself against a backdrop or a stage setting off according to your will. Or like old Rufus said years and years ago when he was asked this, he said, whatever the situation is, think of the best thing that could possibly happen in there as far as you are concerned with the limited and finite knowledge that you've got. Just think of what heaven would be if it were in this particular situation, whatever it is. Think of the thing that would make the person happiest or healthiest or most whole, and ask for that. And then he said always, whether you actually say it with the words of your mouth or not, in your mind or the attitude of your whole being will be, Lord, if you have anything better, cancel out all that I've said and give us what you've got. I think this always has to be. Prayers are answered. And this thing here, I'm sure of this much now, that if you could get the combination to some kind of a heavenly slot machine, and you could always have this come out right, if you could always hit the jackpot time after time after time, I'll bet you that it would be in a very, very short time, you'd be afraid to pray. You'd be scared to death to pray. How many times, just be honest about it, how many times have you, as you look back over your past life, the thing that you were absolutely sure of that you want, and you were sincere, and you were trying to be as clear and trying to be as spiritual as you knew how, and yet you know now when you look back, if that had happened, it was the worst thing that could possibly have happened. Either for yourself or for somebody else. You simply don't know. But there's a safety valve here. And it is that the Spirit is really saying, Lord, according to his little peanut brain, he's doing the best that he knows how here, but according to the experience, according to the temperament that he is, he thinks that this is how his prayers will be answered. But Lord, what he really means is this. And I'm glad that he answers the prayers of the Spirit, meaning that which is in accordance, and that which is in harmony, and that which is in oneness with the eternal nature of God rather than what I think it is. And this is the greatest prayer promise in the whole Bible. The pathways have been already marked out. Or you can take the case of Monica, the mother of Augustine. Here she was when they lived in Carthage. Augustine was a young man, and I mean he did about all that you oftentimes wish that you had done, and hadn't the guts to do it, but he did it. And he was living about as loose and a life as you can imagine. As you can imagine in your wildest dreams. He was a heller from a way back, especially with the women. And his mother, Monica, was worried sick over him. And she went to the church every day, every single morning and every single night. Monica went to the church and she poured her heart out to God for her son, this son that she loved more than anything else. And if there was one thing that Monica was sure of in her mind, it was, dear God, don't ever let him go to Rome. For if he went to the big city, the capital of the world, and all the neon signs and bars and B-girls and everything, oh man, well, not even God would be able to help him then. I mean, not even prayer would work. So please, God, don't ever let him go to Rome. And one night, while Monica was asleep, why Augie, I suppose you would say then, he got up and he sneaked out and got on a ship. And where did he go? Naturally, he went to Rome. And can't you imagine what really must have been in the heart of Monica? The awful, blinding sadness and hurt. She might even have said, how have I sinned that this terrible thing would have happened to my son? And she went to church and she cried her heart out that in somewhere or other, maybe she would, or perhaps she would say, well, maybe I have been praying wrong. Maybe I don't know how to pray. Maybe I haven't done enough penance. Or whatever it is. What have I done wrong and all this stuff? Why hasn't God heard me when I have been coming to church day after day after all this time praying for my son? What have I done wrong? And yet the history, which everybody knows, that it wasn't in spite of the fact that Augustine went to Rome. It was because of Augustine went to Rome that he very, very shortly came under the influence of St. Ambrose, and was converted, and became one of the great mountains of human history, of Christian history. Now, aren't you happier? And isn't everybody happier? That the Spirit took the deep desires of Monica's heart and said, Lord, this woman is just yakking in my ears all day. Lord, you've got to do something about it, and you've got to do it fast. I mean, answer her prayer. Answer the desire of her heart. I can't stand it anymore. Let's get this thing done. And the fastest and the most efficient way was to do just exactly what Monica, with her human mind, thought ought to be done. Put him into the lion's mouth quickly. And the thing was done. So I'm glad that if you had only one prayer in the world, I mean if you had one shot at it only, what would it be? Suppose that, I don't know, some angel or whatever it is appeared to you and said, now you're going to have one prayer. You're only going to be allowed to pray one prayer in life, which will be answered. And you can have it. And you're the one that's going to choose it. Anything that you want. But remember, after this one's answered, you'll never have another prayer answered in your life. What do you think it would be? Well, this has been tried out in many conferences many times. And if I could, if there was room here, and all of you people were divided up into small groups, and you went off by yourself and say, okay, now we're only going to have one prayer answered, what will it be? The amazing thing that you would discover would be that when you all came back and reported, if you're honest about it, I mean if the chips were really down, that your answers would be so similar, even so similar in words, that it would amaze you. And what your answer would be in ways would be that you would want God's will for your life. Because He's the only one that knows what it's all about. I don't even know myself. Even if you went to a psychiatrist for 1,000 years, you still wouldn't know it. Even if you went back and you found out all the numbers of times you had been dropped on your head as a baby, that still wouldn't answer it all. And we've had this other studies of whatever it's called, about this idea of that these experiences actually happen in the womb. And there has been a book, I don't know what it was called, and you go back there, and that they are supposed to be able to regress you, and then it gets dark, and you're in the womb, and all of this stuff, and well, I don't know. But even if you went there, that ain't enough. Really? Where'd you come from? I mean, before the stork dropped you. Where did you come from? What about what the psalmist says in the 139th Psalm? You knew me when as yet there was none of me. In thy book all my members were written when as yet they were not, and the days of my life were allotted before they were. Where did you come from? Does anybody even remotely think that the whole thing started here? I don't think anybody can really think that when you begin to think about it. But whatever it is, but don't get the idea that the life in the womb hasn't got an influence on you, because in this prenatal clinic in Cleveland years and years ago, they found out that whatever the word, that the experiences in the womb have an effect upon you. They took I don't know, white rats or whatever they were, hamsters or whatever. And they calculated in their mind as to what the period of time would be when the cells which make up the mouth and the tongue and the palate, which begin at opposite poles, and as the embryo ages, they come closer together and closer together until, under normal circumstances, by the time the child is born, why these things have merged. And what they did then was that by blasts of air, they got the mother so hysterical and nervous and everything else, and upset her at this period. And they produced generation after generation after generation after generation of baby rats with cleft palates and hair lips, just as just as sure as could possibly be. This went over and over and over and over again. So experiences of that sort do have an influence, do have a physical influence, and do have an influence on the temperament of the offspring. These things happen. Why, they tell about this guy that was a professor of psychology at Harvard, and he was up here and was lecturing on prenatal influences. And he said, why? He said, they've got this old wives' tales here that if you're that if when you were being carried in the womb that your mother was scared by a rabbit that you would have big ears. There's no fact. There's absolutely no scientific basis to this whatsoever, none whatsoever. Or he says they've got the idea that if when you were being carried in the womb that your mama was out in the woods and she saw these otters gnawing on trees there, that you would have buck teeth. He said, no fact to it whatsoever. No, absolutely nothing, no scientific basis to that whatsoever. He said, all of these things are old wives' tales, all of them. Why, he said, when I was being carried in my mother's womb, why, he said, my mother just loved music. Oh, she just and she played the record player day after day. She was just crazy about records. He said one day she had a stack of records in her hand, and she was walking across the room, and the rug was a bit turned up, and she sort of halfway tripped, and the records went flying all over the floor. But it didn't affect me. Affect me. Affect me. Affect me. Affect me. There are pathways. There are pathways of all sorts. So both in the scientific field, I wonder who the pioneer was way back when. Because it's perfectly natural that if anybody hates you, to hate them back. I mean, this is just the normal human reaction. But at some time in history, somebody, way back when, I don't know how, started to return love for hate. And that guy may have been killed then. He may have been burned at the stake. For if he was anything at all, he was a heretic. Because all the authorities of that day could say, why, our whole history, our whole culture. Who do you think you are? This is what our culture is built on. This is what our educational system is built on. To say the least, he would be unorthodox. He would undoubtedly be a heretic. Now, how the thing happened, but at some time or other in history, somebody, for some reason or other, started to love a person who was hating him. And a revolution in human relationships was born. At some time or other in history, nobody knows when, somebody began to do good things for somebody who was using him in a bad way, using him, as the Bible says, despitefully. Some nut went against all the rules of society and culture and started to do good things for somebody who was doing bad things to him. At some time or other in history, somebody began to pray for somebody who was cursing him. Another nut, another heretic. Somebody started to do it. And they made a discovery within themselves that the goals which they would ordinarily want to have happen happened quicker. And they felt better, they felt cleaner. They found a way not to kill your enemy, but to make a friend out of him. And the possibilities of society were born. Even in the early pages of the Bible, all of those rules about doing good and so on. It's limited to your own tribe only. It didn't apply to the Amorites or the Hittites or anybody else who were over the next hill. Those guys you were to kill if you could do it. God in those days was He was your family God. And then He was your tribal God. And then as I got into the land of Canaan, and they became a nation, He became a national God. But He was not the God of the Philistines or the Assyrians or the Egyptians, anybody else. And what's more, their God had only jurisdiction over their own territory, period. And David laments and cries because in fleeing for his life, he has to go into the land of the Philistines because his God hasn't got jurisdiction there. And outer space was Babylon. And it took the carrying away into captivity. And they got out there, out in outer space where God wasn't. And they made a discovery that God was out there also. That prayers were answered there too. That God was out there. And you go on from there little by little by little, and you get into the New Testament. And there all the promises are to whatsoever and whosoever. No limit. Universal. Where they have become sectarian, we have made them sectarian. Pathways have been discovered. One of the great discoverers was the prophet Elisha. And you remember the time that when the king of Syria, when the Syrians invaded Israel, and every time that the Syrian army sets up an ambush or is about to attack the army of Israel, they get out. They escape time after time after time, and the king of Syria, he's mad and he's angry, and he calls his ministers and his generals to him, and he says, "Who's the spy in our camp? Because every time this happens, they get away. There's a spy here." And one of his officers said, "There is no spy here, but there is a prophet in Israel by the name of Elisha. And he says, he even knows our thoughts while we are in bed." And he says, "Where does he live?" "In Dothan." So by night the entire Syrian army encircles the town where the prophet and his servant are. And the prophet and his servant wake up early in the morning, and the servant goes out and he sees that they are surrounded by the foreign army, and he comes in and wakens the old prophet, and he says, "Alas, we are undone." And the old prophet, he says, and he answered, "Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them." There's one of the great promises of the Bible, and you ought to etch it in your mind in whatever kind of a situation you find yourself in. They that are, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed and said, "Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see." And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. And he goes back and he prays some more, and it says that the eyes of the Syrian army were blinded. Now, this evidently is not a physical blinding, but all of us have had the experience time after time of walking through an area, through a store, through a shop, through a school, and thing that we're looking for may be lying right there, staring us right in the face, and we don't even see it, and we may pass it time after time. In some fashion or other, we aren't seeing things. We're blinded. Well, something of this sort happened. And it says that the Syrian army was led back into Samaria. And there they are surrounded by the army of Israel. And they got them in their paws, and they're just itching to slaughter them. And it came to pass when they were come into Samaria that Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in Samaria. And the king of Israel said unto Elisha when he saw them, My father, shall I smite them? Shall I smite them? And he answered, Thou shalt not smite them. Wouldst thou smite those whom thou hast taken captive with the sword and with thy bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink, and go to their master. And he prepared great provision for them. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. And here's the payoff. So the bands of Syria came no more into the land of Israel. I wonder what would happen if we had, you can either call it a war of amazing kindness or whatever else you want to call it. But if throughout the years we had treated our enemies national enemies, or your personal ones, doing good to those that are doing bad to you, showing kindness to those that are unkind. This is a revolution in relationship. This is a discovering of the path of leading us in the right path. Because it's God's nature that enemies will become friends, that all men will become one. Brotherhood in every possible way. There are so many things that can, and oftentimes what seems to be, you're going to have to discover what the pathway is for you. Out of all the possibilities, what is going to witness with you? You're going to have to select. You'll have more people coming up to you saying, the will of God for you is that you ought to do blah, 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 blah. Listen to it and forget about it. Most of these are just spiritual, nosy people. That's about all there's in it. Accept what you witness to. The kingdom of God, and God is within you. And whatever is right for your temperament, you'll know it if your mind is stayed on Him. And oftentimes we get the idea that prayer is a bit somber thing, and that oftentimes I find people that, the way they talk and the way they act and the way they look, it reminds me of this Christian worker who had a drunk in a corner, and she was just waving her finger right in his nose, and she was getting closer and closer, and he was getting more scared and more angry and all mixed up, and finally he pushed her away and said, Lady, if being a Christian is going to make me feel the way you look, I don't want to have anything to do with it. You'll know, coming into the presence of God, into a right relationship with God, which ought to relate you perfectly and in perfect balance without strain with the entire cosmos. Whether it's the entire cosmos of the galaxies up there or the cosmos of your own nature. Ought to relate you in such a way that you ought to be released and happy and joy, and people ought to feel better coming out of church on a Sunday morning than they feel coming out of a bar on Saturday night or out of a movie. But really, if you want to be honest about it, most people feel happier after a good movie than they do after church service. And this is crazy. Because if God is wholeness and joy, remember what it said, what Ezra said. Stop your crying. He said, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And if we elicited that joy and that love and that balance and that wholeness, why, you couldn't keep people out of church or out of camp meetings or out of anything else. Your physical body and everything else would respond to it. You know what you have to do. Say, Father, 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 Lord, 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 what should I do? And the time again, and don't expect that there'll be some angel in white who will all of a sudden whip into the room and say, hi, buddy, what you ought to do is blah, 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 blah. No. Many, many times, but through the desire of your heart, you'll say, Father, 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 and you'll come up against a point where you've got to make a decision. And that's been said by many, many others. You really won't know then, but the desire of your heart, the basic set of your nature is that you want this way, and you've got to make a decision. You make it, and it won't probably be till a long time afterwards when you're able to look back and see that this was right, that God was in it. And you'll be like the man, but you're going to have to go your own way, ultimately, because everything that God has for anybody else is for you and is in you and about you. Get your own guidance from Him. Read, listen, whatever's for you, either on the written page or whatever, you'll respond to it. And that's when He's talking to you. You're going to have to be like the man that went over to Europe, and before he went over there, he went into the barber shop for a haircut. And the barber said to him, how you going? Oh, he said, I'm going to go Pan Am. He said, don't go Pan Am. That's a worse. They've got old planes, and their hostesses are awful, and the food's lousy, and they're always late. They go any other line. Don't go Pan Am. He said, where are you going? Where are you going? He said, Rome. Rome? He said, are you crazy? Why, I said, Rome now, it's so hot and humid. He said, go to London, go to Paris, go to Munich, go anybody. Don't go to Rome. He said, where are you staying? He said, at the Hilton. The Hilton. He said, for Pete's sake. He said, that's just a great big overpriced American barn. He said, they couldn't care less. Go to a little Roman hotel and get a flavor of the country. He said, what are you going to see? Oh, he said, we thought we would see the Pope. He said, the Pope? He says, listen, buddy, you'll get out in that square with 10,000 others. And he said, it'll be hotter than a pistol, and people will be fainting all over. Furthermore, he's a quarter of a mile off. You can't even see him. He said, go to the Colosseum, go to the fountain. He said, don't go to see the Pope. And this guy goes and comes back, and he goes into the barber shop, and he said, well, how was your trip to Europe? He said, just great, just wonderful. He said, and we went Pan Am. He said, boy, what the latest planes, the hostesses were pretty, and he said, we got free meals, and he said, they entertained us all the way, and you know what, we hit every stop right on the nose. And he said, we went to Rome. He said, I can't imagine a more wonderful time of the year to see it. Just a little bit warm, but he said there was a breeze up the ocean. It's just great, just liquid sunshine, marvelous. And he said, you know what, we stayed at the Hilton. Well, I want to tell you, he said, if we had been the crown head of Europe, they couldn't have treated us, rolled out the red carpet. They couldn't do enough for us. It was just great, and the price was really very, very modest. And he says, what do you know? He said, 8 of us got a private audience with the Pope. Why, he said, it was just simply delightful. He came in there, and he gave each of us the papal blessing, and he gave us each a personal message. Why, he said, he came up to me, and he just gave me the real papal blessing right before me. And he said, he leaned over, and he whispered in my ear. He said, my God, he did. What did he say to you? Well, he said, where did you get the lousy haircut? We're going to begin tomorrow morning, and this is going to be 24 hours of kingdom living. You've got three things that are going to come up within 24 hours. 24 hours of a prayer vigil. And then sometime tomorrow night, you're going to write letters to God. And the prayer vigil, the 24 hours of it, will end with a communion service. Now, this can be a training for the life of whole great living. And instead of being a somber thing where everybody's running around with a long face, he says, and we all beholding the glory of the Lord. It's the glory, the joy, are being changed into his likeness bit by bit. Whatever you give your mind to, that's what you're going to grow into. So, and you can take the whole first half of the Lord's Prayer there and shoot. There isn't anything about problems. The trouble with most prayer groups are they're problem groups. And if you keep your eye on the problem long enough, you're going to be the problem. You're going to grow into it. Keep your eye on the glory. Keep your eye on the power. Keep your eye on the health. Keep your eye on the healing. Healing of body, mind, spirit. Keep your eye on the wisdom, on the creativity, on the glory. Heaven and earth are filled with his glory. Uncover the groaning of all creation is groaning for the revealing of the sons of God. Well, we're all that way. Get with it. Uncover it. Release it by beholding the glory of God. So that for 24 hours tomorrow in an intensification in everything that you do, in everything that you say, in everything that you say, get the idea in your mind that the kingdom of heaven is within you, the Spirit of God is within you, and Jesus said, ask me, my Father, and I will come into you and live in you and take up our residence and abode in and express our nature through me. So every so often, if you're talking with anybody, have the reflection of your mind there, and if they should ask you anything, and I can remember this about Rufus and about others, now he had such a sharp mind, he could give 100 answers to anything. But he wouldn't. He would sort of squint up his eye and say, well, now, hallelujah, and all this stuff, and he'd say, well, the Lord seems to be saying. Consider your body, consider your mind, consider your experiences, consider your conscious mind, consider your unconscious mind, consider all that you know about yourself and all that you don't know about. As an instrument, as a piano there. Now, there's all the possibilities there of notes, of chords, and everything else that's in there, which I don't know. But when a master pianist sits down, he expresses his personality through that instrument. And from listening to records, the greatest pianists in the world, different ones will play the same piece. And if you know these guys well enough, you can tell who is playing this piece. Even though all of the notes and all of the timing are supposed to be just exactly the same, his personality gets through, and he's expressing himself through this instrument. Now, I suppose if you were a piano, you would say, oh, shoot, it's the same old notes. I have just prayed and prayed and prayed for God to use me, or for the master musician to use me, but it's the same old cockeyed do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and all that stuff, and it's still the same old me. It isn't the same old you. The instrument is but a different spirit, a different personality, a different will, for different purposes, is taking what you are and putting it together for his own purposes. Think of that. Whether you're playing a game tomorrow, whether you're eating, whatever it's doing, whether you're sleeping, no matter what it is, say, Lord, whatever the sequence of the thoughts and feelings and will which come up, Lord, because I'm trusting you, I'm going to trust them. And if there's a desire, an urging, a feeling to go to somebody and to put my arm around them, I'm going to do it, Lord, but I'm trusting you, and if I get into trouble, it's your fault. And that's a lot easier. It isn't that easy. There has to come, after you've gone through all of the rigmarole, Even though it's a heavenly rigmarole, even though it's the right path, there has to come the time when you've done it, and then when you've done it, you've got to step out on faith. Life is a walk of faith. And say, Father, I am going to believe that this thought, that this prayer, that this desire to speak, or to be still, or whatever it is to do, Lord, I'm going to figure that you are selecting the keys of my memory, of my personality, of my will, for your purposes, and I'm going to be a big enough fool to do it for your glory. Thus saith the Lord, or the Lord seems to be saying. And as I say, don't expect anybody to appear and just knock you over the head. Step out on faith, but keep your mind stayed on him. Your life is your prayer, really. And keep your mind stayed on the glory, on the strength, on the power, on the healing, on the abundance, on any attribute of perfection that you can think of. And it'll be 24 hours of heaven. And I'll guarantee you this, if you will do it, and we're all going to do it, you vow to do it, to present your body and this piano keyboard that you are as a living, not as a dead one, but as a living sacrifice. And stepping out on faith and believing that he's calling the notes, the tunes, the thoughts, the memories, the desires which will come into you. A training ground of the Spirit tomorrow, and you'll make discovery. And if you do, I'll guarantee you that if there are people here that are ill, that they're going to be made well. I'll guarantee you that if there are people here that are overridden and overburdened with anxieties, that you're going to find out what peace is. If there are those that are unstable, they're going to find out what stability of character and mind is. If there are those that are using religion as an excuse to go around butting into everybody else's business, I'll guarantee you that they'll make a discovery of something so much better within themselves. A living, loving Lord. And in the process of it, there'll be an overflow which will heal. Be meek tomorrow. I want you to be two things tomorrow: poor in spirit and meek. And in my book on the Beatitudes, it is the first time that I've ever seen this done, and this is the Spirit of the Lord. This may sound nutty to you, but more came through here than is me. I found out in this book, after all these years, what it means to be meek. I found out in this book what it means to be poor in spirit. Do you know that there are only two people in the whole Bible that are called meek? Now, we all get the idea that to be meek is to be a doormat and to have everybody walk over you. There's only two people in the whole Bible that are called meek. And it is Moses and Jesus. And nobody walked over them. You take these things, and like the Lord seems to be saying, whether you're writing, whether you're speaking, whether you're feeling, whether you're touching, and if you present your body as a living sacrifice, this hand, and you look at your own hands, this will be the hands of God. And when you touch anybody, you say, Father, this is your hands. You touch them. These are your hands. See through my eyes, hear through my ears, speak through my mouth. Touch through my hand, feel through my body. Awaken all the intuitive qualities according to you. You play upon the complete instrument and live and walk in the flesh once more tomorrow, and it will be a miracle day from beginning to end. And if you want to have the courage to do that, and it isn't courage, it's a secret, it's meekness. It's a great secret. And Margaret Timms says that don't tell them what it is, make them come into the book room and buy it. So go on. It's your own fault. Father, thank you, thank you, thank you.